Now, welcome. So, just like that, Damien Duff is gone. The Shelbourne roller coaster was extraordinary. It was intense, and maybe in some ways it was always going to end abruptly like this. But even with that kind of a context, I think Sunday morning caught people by surprise. The show, the football coverage as ever, is with thanks to Sky Sports. You can experience more exclusive live sport than anywhere else, including at least 215 live Premier League games from next season, every golf major, the Ryder Cup, every F1 race, the Lions Tour, of course, which includes first match on Australian soil against Western Force on Saturday, and much more. Watch Sky Sports on Sky or stream it with Now. So, well, we have much to talk about, and happy to say Dan McDonnell is right across this story and he's here in studio. Dan, welcome.
Hi, Joe.
Sunday morning. You have the story in the paper today and on the website. This starts at 10 a.m, where Neil Doyle, who is a co-owner at Shelbourne, tech entrepreneurs, where he's made his money, he's really driving things day to day now, very involved. The context being Friday, not good against Derry, not been a good season. Strong comments from Damien Duff in the media. But Saturday, in your piece, you say pretty normal conversations, and then 10 a.m, phone call to Neil from Damien Duff, I'm gone.
Yeah. And I will say, so I was in Talcott Park on Friday for the game against Derry, and I think I was one of the last people to leave the place. And sort of unusually enough, Neil was actually there waiting outside the press conference room, and Damien Duff went over and was chatting away to him. I could see the two of them as I left, and it was like, sort of, gave a wave, but like this is a private conversation. But I could almost hear Damien Duff say a lot of the same stuff he'd said in the room about, something about 3 years, the last 3 years, which is pretty much what he was saying inside. For the last 3 years, it had been a motivated group, and he seemed exasperated. But I will say, and you chat to people around the club who would say that there have been times across the 3.5 years where it would appear, like he's a bit, he's unhappy with something. And I think I mentioned in the piece, it's just an unusual sort of delicate sort of dependency there, and that often like a manager is afraid he will lose his job, but in Shelbourne the dynamic is that they were afraid that they would lose the manager, and I would say like it's a congested, so there's so many sliding doors and what ifs and if onlys. Part of me kind of wonders if Shells didn't have 5 games in 14 days coming out of the break, if they have a little bit more of a structured season at this point, do you go home on Friday, there's no game till next Friday, and do you sleep on it and come back in on Monday or something a bit more refreshed? And whereas is it a case that on Sunday morning it's like it's all of a sudden it's match day -1 again and UEFA speak and you have to go again and you realise the battery's gone, I'm done.
Neil tries to change his mind.
Yeah.
And then around 10:15 or so, the players arrive because they're having an analysis meeting. And by this stage, 15 minutes later, Duff is in his office with Joey O'Brien, with Luke Byrne, the sporting director. They, you say, are both unprepared for this news, and they spend an hour, give or take, in the office with Duff, trying to talk him around.
And Neil Doyle arrives as well and is part of that too, yeah.
Neil Doyle, wherever he was, got the private jet or helicopter and got straight there, so he's in the office too. So that's 3 of them. That's Joey O'Brien, Luke Byrne, Neil Doyle, sitting around with Duff, presumably saying, Damien, this is rash.
Yeah, I think there was could you stay for Europe? I think that was part of the conversation, because this is a big part of the story, is that in 2.5 weeks' time, 2 weeks' time, Shells have a huge game against Linfield, which has the potential, if they win it, to put them, they've got 3 chances to make group stage football, just need to win 1 tie. It could be 1 lucky draw, could be the difference between, could be 4 million quid like for the club, And obviously, 4 million quid for the club, you do your percentages. There's big percentages, and this is the thing. And I know people have mentioned, like you've mentioned, there's definitely no sense that he's someone who's doing this for the money, genuinely, because he doesn't need the money. Other managers, even if they were hating life, would not walk away from that because they could see a pathway to, not just forget the money side of it, but that maybe the club is the money thing, but even just the prestige, being involved in a group stage campaign.
Sure. When you say percentages though for people, you mean Damien Duff would get a percentage of that 4 million. So Stephen Bradley, it's a typical thing. Other managers would have a significant percentage of the prize money brought in. So you're talking significant six-figure sum into your bank account potentially.
It'd be well known that Stephen Kenny and Stephen Bradley both made substantial six-figure sums from group stage campaigns in the past. Yeah,
Duff's on the record. I don't even know what my salary is.
Yeah. Which is, from speaking out, I did a piece with Andrew Doyle last year, who would have been the person who persuaded Duff to take the job initially. And look, Andrew's on the record as saying that Duff didn't even, the money didn't come up until after the negotiation. It was no part of the negotiation at all.
See, I suppose, and financials, that's part of it. But even that conversation of Damien, this is rash. Don't do this. European adventure. I'm sure they've said to him, listen, we're kind of, the league is probably gone, is what they're saying. You're 4 points off second. We've a European adventure. This can still be a good season as a follow-up to an extraordinary season. Stay for the European adventure. The Champions League music. I'm surprised that wasn't like a smelling salt for him. Did he, from what your understanding in that meeting, was it like a flat all the way, boys, no chance, no chance, no chance? Or was there, I don't know.
My sense, it was more not returning at all, that the decision was made. And the one gap in the story is, and I'm sure in time we'll hear it, is what happened to Damien Duff? What conversations was he having with people in his life between, I don't know, 10 o'clock Saturday morning and 10 o'clock Sunday morning,
Who are, in so much as we know, his wife aside, I'm sure, who are his sounding boards?
That's unclear. That is unclear. That is a question you'd love to ask, and it's a theory that some people would have around this. And obviously, you're chatting to a lot of people in the last couple of days. It would be like, or say last couple of days, the last 24 hours about this.
Feels like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
There would be a sense of, well, who is the sounding board? And like, I don't know, he's Brian Kerr in the past, but this is the thing. He said stuff in the last while about sort of no friends in football. I mean, I think that row with Stephen Bradley was quite, I'd imagine that was quite draining, because that was like, there was a wider group of people there who probably fell out, so I don't know. Like, certainly when I started to get messages about this yesterday, you try and like reach out to people you think might know in terms of being connected, and they didn't. So I'm sure, and who knows, there might be people he really trusts that we don't know. They're sworn to secrecy on it. But it certainly seemed to surprise people who you thought might have known.
By this stage, an hour in the office, we were meant to have our meeting at 10:15. The players are on the training pitch and must be aware something is up. And then you describe a scene whereby the players are waiting on the pitch. It's quite cinematic, really. And the delegation from the office walk towards the players, led by Duff.
Yeah.
And the news is given pretty briefly. It seems Duff spoke first, and the line which everybody remembers, because you're seeing different sources, people have different versions of the truth even 20 minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
But the line that seems to have resonated with the group is, I've taken you all as far as I can take you, in effect. Yeah,
that is the one line. I think that's disputed, and people will have different. I mean, do you remember yourself everything you've said in a in a conversation? And you're certainly trying to piece some of that stuff together. But yeah, that's clear that's what was said. And what I'm unclear about is, obviously, I mean, I presume people were arriving that morning into the training ground, and what was it like, because he was in the building as such, and I don't know, did people, you can't speak to every player and every person. Did people sniff it? I think he was in regular clothes. I think there's a couple of things where it's like, okay, this isn't your usual. Like, they have a game, this evening, Monday evening. This is like 24 hours before a game. So there's a set routine that you do a day before a game. It's like analysis meeting. Like, it's not something you'd be sort of, particularly for someone who's spoken a lot about professionalism. It's not, a big thing about standards. You're not going to be loose the day before a game and just arrive in a bit late. But the game. So I think people, when they saw them coming across the pitch, they had an idea what was.
I'm sure he's still in the office.
Yeah, why is the owner here, and why is other co-owner here? Why are other people here? Yeah.
So again, this is all in Dan's piece. Dan's reporting, talking to people involved. Mark Coyle, the captain, then spoke, it seems.
Impromptu, yeah.
It seems like it was conciliatory on two fronts. One, I mean, if you want to stay, you can stay. Anything we can do to change your mind. And secondly, thanking Duff for, in effect, I think the phrase you used was changing our lives.
Yeah, which I think for Mark in particular, I mean, Mark when Damien Duff was appointed Shelbourne manager, Mark Hoyle was a part-time footballer working in Letterkenny Hospital playing for Finn Harps, who was formerly on the Donegal GA panel when he was younger, but had never been a full-time professional footballer. Duff sees something in him, goes up to Donegal, or I don't know where they meet, but like Mark Hoyle has now lived in Dublin for a couple of years as a full-time player and is the captain of the league winners last year. So, and there's multiple stories in the dressing room that would follow that path.
As you understand it then, this manager who has burned, it feels like, with both frustration and a lot of time with love for this group, and they've been through a lot together. He says his piece, Mark Coyle says his piece. It doesn't seem like it was hugs for everyone, big emotions, few tears. It seems like it was more abrupt and a kind of, right, all the best, gone.
Yeah, I think Neil Doyle spoke then, and then I think Duff, Neil Doyle and Luke Byrne left and they went to the car park, and I think it might have been a bit emotional there.
Yeah.
But
not with the players necessarily.
No, but I mean, no, I think Joey O'Brien said with the players, I think there was like shell shock sense, and I think obviously this started to, I suppose, leak out into the football world around sort of 1:00ish, and obviously players would come off the pitch, and it felt to me that a lot of the messages I certainly would have been received would have been more from within football, sort of as in maybe players telling other players and other clubs, and that's where it seemed to be coming out of initially. But yeah, this was swift, and while I think that there were attempts to get Duff to change his mind, as far as I'm aware, I think some of the prominent people at Shelbourne were sort of having a couple of drinks in the afternoon, drowning their sorrows. Yeah. Like it was when there was a bit of a vacuum between the actual statement confirming it. It was already done.
There was a WhatsApp rumour that Joey O'Brien left as well, but he actually took the session.
He was there. I think they barely trained. That's the thing. Well, but he was there, and then he was with the Shells officials until, Joey O'Brien, and this is the thing, there's all these interwoven relationships here. Like Luke Byrne is the sporting director. When Damien Duff was the manager of the Shamrock Rovers under-15s, as you've mentioned earlier, Luke Byrne would have been with him in that journey. But Luke Byrne and Joey O'Brien are actually very close to their time at Rovers. So Duff comes in at Shelbourne. Luke Byrne is the captain already there. Joey O'Brien comes in. Like Joey O'Brien and Luke Byrne will go back further than Damien Duff and Joey O'Brien would, if you know what I mean. So there's all these dynamics and relationships and crossovers. So it's probably not a huge surprise that Joey O'Brien appears to be staying. Of course, like Joey O'Brien could take this week and see what happens, but it's not one of those where like the manager and the assistant have this relationship and they're strangers to everyone else. It's a little bit different.
Back to your point about Duff being something of a lone wolf. It's interesting. You said, you're getting messages from people in the game, from other managers, and they're almost saying like, is this true?
Yeah.
What's happened? It's not like they have a hotline to Duff. They're coming to you going, what's the story here? So you must have had a very palpable sense of the shockwaves almost throughout the league.
Oh yeah. I think, like when something like that happens, there was a lot of what's going on. Is it true? Is he gone?
Damien Duff messaged you.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I did mention this. Like he
You missed the big scoop, son.
Oh, don't. No.
It's important to check your phone sometimes.
Oh, don't. No, you've gone straight there, have you? No. Look, he. I mean, this is the thing. Like I was off yesterday, and I was at a family event, and all this stuff sort of starts to kick off as it does, and you become like, oh, okay, I need to just text absolutely everyone and anyone, and is this happening? And is this true? And then it comes a point where like, well, you just have to text everyone involved in this, and there's no replies or whatever, and then you get back on the road and you have a 10-month-old in the car, and you're driving up the road. And you may sometimes, if you do that, miss a message.
Ouch.
But it was only later that evening that I'd sort of figured out that people at Shells were surprised that it hadn't come out in our environment too, because I think he told them he'd notified one or two people. And yeah, the moral of the story is if you have a lot of WhatsApp conversations going on your phone, you may miss something
so kind of
important.
What, 6, 7 that evening you're flicking back through the unread messages and then there's one from
a
D Duff.
No, because sorry, I don't know. It's just like, is this self-indulgent? But like, there is an element of, as you text someone and then you get the blue tick. And I saw the blue tick and there was no reply. And you're like, all right, okay, well, there's something going on. But obviously, there been like in this world that happens all the time. Like, that's just the job. Like you might send someone a message and there's a blue tick and there's no reply, and you go, well, that's fine. Look, if they're busy with something, but you should maybe always like check back in with those things, but not if you're on the road and you might miss something.
It was simple. I resigned.
Simple resign this morning. That was it.
Yeah.
And like, it's just politeness to. You'd appreciate that, but it's yeah. Like
you thumbs up later that evening.
It's just like, cheers, I heard about that. Yeah.
So that's the drama of the day, and I guess the league digesting it since. It's hard to escape the feeling that he's very, very tired and he's been very, very rash here. You referenced the 5 games in 14. Maybe the lack of sounding boards, we're speculating on that, but there's no one that we know is there. Obviously, the guys tried to talk him around, but it's still hard to shake the feeling that he has been rash. Yeah,
I mean, it's a really tough one, Joe, because I don't get the sense still that anyone is angry with him, as in within the club, because they know how much he gave, and they know that he's not someone who's like drained them of cash or has been sort of, sometimes you might have that feeling with. You hear that with people, with managers, and they're like, well, he took this or he took that or he spent wildly on this and that. Like, Michelle's definitely put their budget up this year, but I don't think they've quite gone to the place. I think they're planning to go to the place, and I think the support probably would have been there in this window, I think, to get closer to that place. But it's not someone... Like, someone, as he said earlier, is that dependency. Like, they needed him more than he needed them, whereas most people in management need their employer more than it's the other way around. So it's hard to be angry. I will say I haven't really talked about Friday yet, the actual game itself, because I know I've actually said to you, like, the Duff sideline experience in Talca is a thing. Like, Friday was possibly the first time where I did look at it and go, some of the players aren't having this, that he was really, really unhappy with what was a very lethargic and flat display against Derry. And it was quiet. It wasn't a derby, so it didn't have that sort of constant hum on the ground. And to be honest, the main stand side in Talca Park anyway wouldn't be the noisiest. It's more family, the hardcore over the far side. So quite often, as people who've come to Talca have found, you can hear almost everything Damien Duff is saying. Like 10 minutes into the game, a Derry City player, draws a foul and Duff is roaring at the linesman going, he's a con man. He does that every week. And people are laughing because you can hear this. But as a result, then across the game, people in that stand are hearing every instruction coming from the sideline. And like 1 or 2 points, he hammers particular players, and Sean Boyd has spoken previously about his love-hate relationship with Damien Duff. He's on record again speaking about it. There was a part of the laugh and joke at the end of last season. And there was at one point in the game where Duff in the first half was trying to get the Shells players to press because Derry were just popping the ball around them. And I remember he shouted something to Sean Boyd, and Boyd almost looked over to throw his hands as if to say, like, what are you saying? Like, what more do you want? Was almost the body language thing.
And when he hammers them, give us a sense of that.
Like, it is just, like, it is very, I'm not saying it's the most sophisticated football speak, but it's just like, Boydie, and it's very much like press. Actually, there was a spell in the first half where they weren't passing the ball particularly well because Derry had owned the ball, and every time a player got the ball, he was like, pass, like almost coaching game by game, like, and for some reason you could just hear it, and it was like something it was more the dynamic you might associate with like a training session where you're watching a coach at the side of the pitch rather than a game. And it feeds into what he says afterwards. And he has said this earlier in the season. There was a game against Pats where they were really flat in the first half. And then in the second half, they were really animated. He was a bit wired on the sideline again, and they won 2-1. And he spoke after, and like you could run a line through some of the quotes, and he said then, look, I still think they're too reliant on my energy, that sometimes my energy on the sideline mirrors what we see on the pitch. And on Friday, he was clearly seeing no energy and was bringing the A game of energy from him and just wasn't getting it. And he spoke after about, again, the players were flat, were they lifeless? And it was just something that, okay, of course, in the aftermath of him leaving, you analyse everything that you see and you go, well, in hindsight, that makes sense. But there was a couple of times where it was like, and actually I mentioned this in a piece on Saturday morning, that in a sort of a wrap of the Friday night games, that I was actually wondering, is the next step for Duff having to replace some of the players that have been with him all the way through? Because he's brought them to some amazing places, but you felt like he's getting to the point where it's like, well, if you're exasperated here, like, is the next stage having to like regenerate? And I kind of wonder in some way, is that part of his leaving, that you realise I want to make all these changes, but obviously that's a job of work. But equally, to go back to where you started with this, is it's a bit rash. I mean, again, I'll just step back from it and go, they've got this huge European tie in 2 weeks, which again, potentially with a couple of things going their way, they are involved until December in the group stages, which you can just imagine what an adventure that would have been. But, maybe, look, we have to look at the person as well. I'm sure we might speak a bit about like what he brought to the league and to the job and to sort of the eyes and the engagement. But I suppose like that is maybe his point, is that's one person. That's a lot, maybe, that can fall heavy on the shoulders.
And it is this theme of, I'm driving this, or me and Joey, we're driving this. The players aren't even meeting us halfway here. I've no more to give. And probably a feeling from him that is sustainable when we're winning and when you're not as deep into it in terms of however many years he's been at the club. But as soon as things go wrong and then you can't get a reaction, it's a bit like you get more tired running without the ball than with the ball. And it just seems like he's become depleted, more tiffs with managers, the grassy knoll at Dalymount. It's all kind of spiraled a little bit. Like I always felt his methodology was short term, and it can't be reliant just on how much I'm giving to it, and I'm like the jump leads for this whole operation. And even your point there about having to replace players, that's where, to use almost like the opposite on the spectrum to Duff, that's where Carlo Ancelotti would sit back and say, I'm going to have to replace a few of these now. It's, that burst we had is over. We've got the European adventure. We've got next season. And I'm going to think about this in 18 months, 2 years. And I'm going to understand that in the short term, I'm going to see things I really don't like in my team. Duff, his level of professionalism, his intensity, his honesty of effort, he can't handle it. It's like it's scrambling him to see things not being done on the pitch the way he wants to do it. It doesn't strike me as someone who he can think long term. He wants, like, come on, what can I do to shock them tonight?
Yeah, and like on Friday, as I said, it's that third person stuff is a bit unusual. It's like jarring in a way, and like speaking about what an unbelievable professional you were as a player, and I suppose like even the fact that he was negatively comparing his players to the Shamrock Rovers squad, and their mentality to keep coming back, but also I suppose if you look at say Stephen Bradley at Shamrock Rovers, that they had a meltdown in the league last year. Now look, the fact he did so well in Europe sort of sugarcoated their year, but then they've come back and they're streaking ahead, and maybe in some respects like Duff is like a victim of his own success, because it feels like a massive failure where they are at the moment this year. And it does when you've won the league and you've got to the top of the mountain, and like I still think it will stand the test of time, that achievement. Yes, there was like Rovers weren't at their best in the year, but still, like Shells were, fourth, fifth budget. Like they shouldn't have won the league with that squad. Yeah. But as a result, then it feels like a massive regression to only be like 4 points off second and potentially heading into a group stage campaign. And sometimes, like, this is the thing, like, Stephen Bradley's done 9-10 years at Shamrock Rovers now. He's had some really difficult spells in that. And And it does seem that just with Damien Duff that, look, he had difficult spells along the way. I know it's been mentioned earlier on, like he nearly left the club due to issues with the owners in 2023. Like, you know, there was, like, they got hammered in a cup final. Like, when he got the job, a lot of people said, oh, he'll be gone out here in 6 months. And he stayed 3.5 years. He outlasted a lot of the most negative predictions, but yet he still leaves it with the sense of he's walked.
Yeah.
Go and gets, Duff, Duff gets going, whatever. Go and gets tough, Duff gets going. And it's a bit, I feel that that's a bit unfair because he stayed for so long and he did things, but equally how he left does feed into your point about the shelf life.
You said Friday was the first time you thought the players, I'm not having this.
Just a couple of little reactions, yeah.
But I think it's worth stating, and we touched on it in the conversation last week, there has been a change in the style of play this year.
Yeah.
Born of disappointment in Europe last year, and they looked at stats and they looked at how they were playing their football, and they've tried to change things. So that is part of this story this year.
Yeah, no, they definitely tried to. It was actually a little thing. I was walking out on the pitch on Friday, and I was talking to Mark Connolly, the Derry City defender, and we were commenting on how good the pitch was, and he was sort of saying, I think some people possibly within the league maybe were thinking that the bad pitch suited them. It was something he wanted, but I had certainly heard privately that he was hammering them privately about the pitch. It needs to be better because they want to play better football. They want to play possession football.
Does he have the players to do that?
I think he probably has signed one or two who have, but they've probably been a bit toothless in some of their attacking play, and just one or two acquisitions that they thought would bring quality to them in forward areas haven't worked. Like, there are some very straightforward football reasons for why they haven't gone well, and sometimes there's a tendency, and I do it as much as anyone because of the fascination in the character, is that you look at it all through the prism of the personality of the manager and how that dynamic might be affected within the group. But you could just look at it and go, yeah, this is part of the evolution of any team, and that you change your style, it takes a bit of time. You lose a bit of momentum across a 15, 16 game patch. Like, there is just one of the realities of the league here is that you play a lot of football in April and May and June, and there's no time to work on maybe something like that.
Change of style is at his instigation.
It is, yeah.
He should know there'll be growing pains.
With a view to Europe, where they're hoping to get the payoff.
Europe's in 2 weeks.
They're hoping to be in Europe. Okay, they're playing Linfield, which is a bit of a different type of derby game. But either way, after that, they're going to play against a European team. And the hope is, unlike last year, they know how to keep the ball at times when they're under the caution and how to manage that type of European game.
You've changed your style very consciously and deliberately.
Yeah.
Growing pains.
Yeah.
With a view to Europe.
Yep. I think so. I believe so. Yeah.
You walk out 2 weeks before Europe.
Yeah. No, it's baffling. Like, there is no doubt that, again, there is an irrational element to it. But in saying that, we don't know the toll it's taking on someone as a person, firstly. And secondly, do people wonder that actually, God, have I just lost it here to the point where maybe the best thing for me to do is leave here before Europe? And that is a very kind interpretation. And I totally get that. But do you look at it and think, that line, I've taken you as far as I could. Like, does he think, this isn't, like, does he see signs and think, God, this is a bad vibe. We're going to be, I'm going to this is going to be worse in 10 days' time. Like, the atmosphere is going to be really bad in 10 days' time. Now, I think with a couple of days to chill and relax, and, if the Linfield game, if for some reason last Friday, the next game was Linfield on Wednesday, Thursday, I feel they could have got something back for it.
You don't think his words on Friday would have irretrievably broken bond?
Oh, I think some players would have been annoyed by it for sure. But, like, again, at times, with other managers and clubs, you hear that, like, managers have annoyed players. I think, you ride it out. And like, there are still gaps to this. Like, what did he pick up or hear? Some of the stuff on Friday about, like, the stuff about the siesta, and it was almost suggested, what were his players doing today? Like, what has triggered this? Is he seeing Instagram of people out for coffee, or I don't know what it is?
That was my main
something that's a bit
thought.
Like, yeah.
It was too specific a complaint.
Yeah.
It was too, I did this. He basically said, not all my players did.
Yeah.
So it did read to me as, I've had word, one way or another.
Picked up something.
That they're out in the sun on the hottest day of the year, getting a tan. They're doing something I don't like that's unprofessional. And again, back to this point, he can't handle it. Because he's given so much that you're doing that. I can't contain that. I'm scrambled.
That's what I thought that with those comments. And a couple of weeks back, he did it again. I mean, I'll go back to this. There's a recurring theme of comments that you can piece together across a bit of time. Like that stuff then in Cork where he went on a rant about the League of Ireland mid-season break. And again, in the chat you had with us after, that wasn't quite a bit of a longer one. He sort of said that he'd had words with one or two of his players about it. He'd been butting heads with one or two of his players about it, who I think players had said to him, well, no, they felt that they could go for a couple of days off. They needed a bit of a recharge, and he disagreed. So there's an underlying thing here of him just getting bothered by
work
people.
Rate.
Yeah. But work rate and work mates. Like, people can sometimes get fatigued with the people they're around with all the time, and maybe this is what leads you to the conclusion that you need that distance, that finality, that this is the best for everyone, even if I don't think anyone in Shelbourne believes it's the best for everyone. And even if they beat Linfield, and even if they can get a route to the group stages, am I going to be sitting here, or are people going to be sitting going, you know what, maybe the best thing that happened was Duff leaving? I'd still be surprised, like, if that conclusion was reached. Now, that may end up happening as a scenario, because I think there's going to be still, like, there's a big hole that's going to be left there over the long. Who knows? I could be wrong. Maybe he's put the foundations in, and someone else can take it on now. But
you could argue it's his one last stunt. I'll pull a fan into the crowd. How about this to get ready for Linfield?
Some people thought it was a stunt. That goes to thing like yesterday. And to be honest, I think that like, I'm sure loads of people were getting the messages that were going around from sort of 1 o'clock onwards. But I definitely think there was a real sense, more so than with any other person, that you'd be like, I just wonder, is this a game? So someone within football was on to me, made an example of a manager they'd worked with who used to regularly go in and resign. Yeah. And that was a tactic to get your budget.
It crossed my mind. Like, yeah. I wasn't shocked he resigned. I mean, I talked to you last week, and I said, I had a real feeling that something was coming, because I said to you, what's going on with Duff? And you sort of said, that's a bit of a leading question. I didn't think he'd resign on Sunday.
What's the difference between shock and surprise? Like, you know, I think a lot of people are shocked but not surprised. I mean, are they fundamentally the same thing?
Yeah, I don't understand that distinction.
A lot of people have been saying, I'm shocked. I was a bit shocked, but I'm not surprised. And I've probably said it myself, but I'm not sure.
I don't know what you mean.
It's almost like it makes a little bit of... Now that you've said it, yeah, I saw it coming.
Well, we could definitely apply that to if I heard on Thursday they've talked him round. Well,
I've had that conversation, I guess, with people in the last 24 hours who have said, and this is within the club, who their view was, yes, they feared it was coming, but they didn't think it would be now. I think if you were to put people on the spot in the club, probably, you know, on Friday night, and said to them, do you think he'll still be here in 12 to 18 months? I think you would not have got people going, definitely, yes. Yeah. But if you'd said to them, do you think he'll be in the dugout for the game against Linfield?
Sure. And then, to be fair, I would have thought that too, but I just felt the end was coming.
Yeah.
It's just it's an unsustainable way for him to manage, you know, and it's of the Mourinho school, but then it's also even mixed in with like a more kind of it even means more, I think, than it does to Mourinho. Like, on some kind of visceral level, it's like, and I mentioned it in the intro, he would do interviews on a Friday, and it often looked to me that someone had been bubbling all week, like up and up and up, and it would almost erupt in like an interview. And that's, you know, back to our sounding board question. I think as he becomes a manager into the future, he can't do it this way.
Yeah, the Mourinho comparison is everywhere, and I see what people are saying, definitely, in terms of like the interview style, the siege mentality. There's absolutely no doubt that he's taking something from Mourinho. I know what you're saying. I think Mourinho, it seemed like he had a very close relationship with his Chelsea players, that Chelsea group.
What I was getting at there is it's less cynical than Mourinho.
Yeah, no, exactly, because
it's a real.
That's what I was just going to say, that like that Duff was on a journey with that group. Like, he was finding houses for them on Daft. He was like he knew everything about their lives. And I'm sure Mourinho had, like, I think he had a good relationship with some of that Chelsea team for sure. But I think that with Duff, this was something where almost like you kind of get the sense there was an almost element of being too close at times with some of it. And it's like to me, the reaction to him leaving from people within the club is more like the kind of conversation you'd have with someone when you have a family member that you love, but they've done something a bit rash, as opposed to this is someone who's left us in the lurch here. You know, it's a distinction. And obviously I think with the Mourinho thing as he went on, it was very transactional,
Yes.
his engagement with everyone, whereas I don't think there was a transactional basis to this.
That's precisely it. Precisely. Yeah. And that's why it is quite sad that it's ended this way, because now he is open to when the going gets tough, Duff gets going thing. Because it's so abrupt, not acrimonious in terms of how it was done, but it feels acrimonious. And that's now a reputation which he can't really quibble with too much, unfortunately. So to what extent has he done himself a degree of reputational harm here?
Yeah, I know Eamon Sweeney wrote about that this morning and centred in that point. And certainly, like with one or two conversations I would have had with people yesterday, that point would have been expressed that, this looks bad. Now, he's still going to get loads of offers. That's an absolute given. I mean, you know, all the stuff that we've talked about, whether it's today or other days, about attention, publicity, like a sponsor's dream. I think Shell's had an annual dinner with sponsors, or like a sort of a corporate dinner, and Duff would come and speak and entertain, and that's it. Like, this is, so that power will always be attractive. So he will always have offers. But yeah, in terms of maybe that trajectory, in terms of that sense of people saying, well, this is the stepping stone towards something bigger, which in some respects Duff sometimes rejected by saying that this was it. It wasn't a cynical, again, transactional thing to get to the next place. But I think people will go into anything with him with their eyes open, thinking that that's a possibility. But you know what? The thrill ride could be so good that people will still go for it anyway. But say people talk about the Ireland job, right? Like, let's think about the Ireland job, which I think, Stephen Bradley last year was speaking about it, that he should get the job. And certainly some people think, now, you could look at it a different way and go, is there a time in the future where Ireland need a quick hit for a period of time?
Hamer Hal Grimson 18-month.
Yeah. And maybe that could be attractive. But yeah, some people will look at the volatility. Some people who like certainty, people who like certainty in their lives, and they want someone for a period of time.
Well, I guess at the moment what's in his favour is this will be a short, sharp burst. This won't go past 4 or 5 years realistically, but the first 3-4 years could be very successful. Yeah. That's ultimately what will attract a lot of people, because how many managers go beyond that anyway?
But how many managers get to 3 years? Like, this is the thing, like this was always the thing about Duff, in some respects, that he felt he'd found a great place of peace in a way at Shells, because he had everything he needed there and that degree of security. And people, and I understand that people say, you should want to go to England or go wherever. And people have said this about Stephen Bradley as well at times, and at times he's turned down opportunities, because the chances are there's a very, very strong chance you will go to England and you'll be at work in 18 months.
Correct.
And you don't have that security that you have where you are. Like, you talked about Keith Andrews last week, like the percentage call, and that's not to be disparaging to Keith Andrews, because I hope it goes through and he does well, but certainly the most likely percentage is that in 18 months' time you're not. So you're to get to 3 or 4 years is like beating all the percentages.
I played a clip of Duff in year 1 at the start of the show and I believe he meant it with every fibre of his being, but it's quite a Damien Duff, heat of the moment, impulsive thing, and he's saying, I love this club, I'm giving everything, and I'll never manage another club in the League of Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, if he wants to stay in Dublin, which it seems he does, that will be tested to its limits, because I don't suspect Duff and at a loose end are very compatible things. So what are the odds that he never manages again in the League of Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know,
I can answer the question if you want.
Yeah, what's your answer?
That he never manages again in the League of Ireland, 1% chance.
You think he definitely will?
I think if he wants to stay in Dublin, which he does.
Yeah. I think they live in. They live in. I think they live in Wicklow. But I'm trying to think. Then, is there a regional option that appeals, or are you just looking through the eyes of 4 Dublin clubs, like we all get accused of doing in the media sometimes? Could he be tempted by a project somewhere else in Ireland, but you're still at home? I just don't know. I would tend to. I think if you put a gun to my head, I would agree with you. and say that him at a loose end. I mean, all the stuff that I think you've referred to earlier on about, like, you know, being at Rovers, like doing stuff at 5, 6 in the morning. Like, he didn't need to be doing that. And it may well be, and again, I don't know, like all the psychoanalysis of someone that you only know on a surface level, you know, it can be ridiculous. But my sense of him definitely would be that he always had this line, I'll just go and be a barista. I don't think I'll go to the south of France and drink a glass of wine, as he was when Shells convinced him to take the gig. What's he going to do? Does he end up being a pundit or something? You know, that isn't like just the Roy Keane thing, but Roy Keane couldn't get jobs in a lot of cases. Damien Duff will get jobs if he wants. And has he burnt bridges with places? Look, football, for all that we talk about it, and like even with some of the conversations I had people involved, and even like some players, like they all know, as someone said, look, one of the players at one point said to me very much, well, it's just a rootless business, isn't it? You have to move on. And that is not cold. That's just what you have to be conditioned to thinking. Yeah. And yes, you say something in the moment that I'm sure you genuinely, as you say, believe at that time, but it's very easy to come back and say, well, look, this project was sold to me. You know, it's like, does he end up managing Shelbourne again in the future? Like, is that just the most?
That's very possible.
Is that just like the most plausible scenario? But again, I'm wondering about answering this with the heart and the head, because I think a lot of people around the league yesterday, notwithstanding the rivals who gloat and enjoy it, and of course, because if there's no such thing as proper fan culture, if you don't gloat and enjoy that, the game's gone if people don't revel in it. But certainly, I think a lot of people, and again, people in the league and in positions of authority, and even at other clubs, felt a little bit of a sense of deflation at the
Well, we should finish on that point for both Shells and then for the league. For the league, this is terrible news.
It's anyone who tries to say otherwise, I just don't know what world that you live in. Like, I have made the point, there is definitely a distinction between, like, the league has definitely been on the up, was on the up prior to Duff coming in. I don't think Damien Duff is the reason that several clubs have full houses every week. I think that the attendances within, in some cases, modest small stadiums is a product of brilliant community work and things that clubs have done. And it's not as if Shelbourne away was the game that sold loads of extra tickets. You know, it's not that. So I think that's separate. But it's the eyeballs, it's the awareness, it's being dropped into the national discussion, like the national discussion naturally. Like, I was only talking to someone on Saturday morning, and maybe this can be self-serving and looking at it through a media point of view, but I do think this extends to just how things work in this world. Like, the Lions were in Dublin on Friday night. It's a massive Gaelic Games weekend, and on Saturday morning, like on our homepage, big national news website, the Damien Duff quotes was the sport story, and this is the post-match of a game between teams on 4th and 6th in the League of Ireland Premier Division. The idea that anyone else, you know, could command that attention without it being something like sensationally dramatic, like in the past we've seen implosions at clubs and behind the scenes stuff or inflammatory stuff, or a Mason Melia, like there will be stories, sure, but it's that consistent stream of it, and it's something that in the Virgin Media stuff, you know, that the Duff thing would have been mentioned. It's just about it being there. And as someone who like probably is invested in it and probably has gotten a bit of grief from people at times saying, you're doing too much Shell stuff and you're too obsessed with Shells. But it's like, man, I'm doing this a long time. You're like, you suddenly just follow the numbers and follow the interest, and how many times in the last week on all sorts of like forums and podcasts and people were like, it's a League of Ireland discussion centred around Damien. And by the other managers and in the league would even say it to you themselves that, you know, even if they might be riled by him, they also recognise that there's a leverage that comes with them. If you're the guy that's beating Damien Duff, like it's also good for you. So now it's a real test of the league's growth, I think. You know, that I wouldn't be completely downbeat about it. Although my initial reaction, I must say, was to feel a little bit sick and have a sinking feeling, thinking, this is bad. Selfishly, this is bad. But there are things that I hope would endure. The people like that some of the message that Damien Duff sold at times about its relevance. You know, this is the heartbeat of Irish football, and I think people are more conscious of it. But it's a hell of a void. It's like we have a one-horse title race potentially this year, depending on what happens in the games tonight. But I think it's going that way. Trust me, like when you get to September, October, like it's a crowded sporting world that we live in, and this has been a golden era. There's no, and I've spent half my life doing it, so I think I can actually speak about that.
Yeah,
it's never been like this.
I'm very
I hope
sad.
It's like this again.
I'm very sad he's gone.
Yeah,
I have to say. I said upstairs, we were sitting around, I said, it's rare, you know, you're in the good old days, but we were in the good old days. That's how we're going to remember them. Duff,
we knew it at the time, definitely.
Last one then. So if the interest in the league amongst that kind of wider sphere is going to be about to be tested, then Duff's theory that I'm the one driving this thing is about to be tested. Shells have to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
What's your instinct about what they'll do? Joey O'Brien stay on, Linfield matches, etc.
The vibe I got yesterday was definitely like stability is the number one. So it would, and it makes sense to me, like it wouldn't make any sense to bring in a new voice and a new way of doing things. Like they've been doing things in a particular way for like 3.5 years. And in fairness, Damien Duff last Friday, as mentioned, he's always said it's Joey as well. Like Joey O'Brien has always been spoken about as a big part of the story. And anecdotally, you certainly hear that he's a menace to players who are underperforming, you know, so he has that reputation. So look, he doesn't have a pro license. I think he's due to, hopefully be on the next course, which I don't think is till early next year. So I think you get a 60-day sort of, what's the word? A sort of 60-day free run at it, you know?
Grace period.
Yeah, I might even just do it again. You get a 60-day grace period. So... you know, they have UEFA games within that, so they might have a few things to work out. But I think, yeah, the logical thing, certainly in what I've picked up, is that I think within the club, I'm sure they would see Joey O'Brien as the natural one. But you know, I know Sean O'Connor's in Waterford tonight for us. You know, we haven't heard Joey O'Brien speak. You know, like I don't know how he feels about it. He is a very private person, you know, and by his nature, very different. Like it's very different in terms of the front facing element of it, and how he would carry himself. I think behind the scenes, he's a loud one, and his media presence has always been different. So I don't know. Does he want it? Like, would he want to be out front for that? But I suspect that that's the way that they will go. He is very well regarded. So yeah, I'd imagine that's for Shells. The idea of recruiting and hiring a manager at this time is just probably a non-runner for them.
Okay. Well, I guess whenever he chooses to surface, we'll all look forward to hear what Damien Duff has to say, what he's going to do. It was fun while it lasted, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, thanks very much.
Thank you.